Welcome to the Water Channel podcast, a series of conversations on water, food, and agriculture. We capture stories and insights that are defining our present and are shaping our future. I am Abraham Abhishek.
And I am Meghna Mukherjee.
On July 12, 2022, Sri Lanka President Gotabaya Rajapaksa said he would step down after crowds of citizens forced their way into his official residence in Colombo. This came on the heels of months of protests about skyrocketing prices of everything, including essential goods like fuel and wood. Inflation has gone up from 10% in January this year to almost 55% as of June.
And because of this, there have been power cuts all over the country. Healthcare is reeling under lack of medicines. There is an acute fuel shortage which has resulted in long queues around fuel stations. The country's foreign reserves have also practically emptied out, which means it has very little funds to buy fuel and other essential supplies from other countries.
How did it come to this? Depends who you ask. The government blames the COVID pandemic, especially its impact on tourism, which is the country's biggest foreign currency earner. Many experts, and indeed the protesters, blame the government, the president, alleging that this was a case of economic mismanagement on their part. One of the government decisions that have been highlighted is the decision taken in April 2021 to only allow organic farming in Sri Lanka.
This was a follow up to the president's 2019 election campaign, which promised to transition the country's farmers to organic agriculture. Now, this was thought to be done over a 10-year period. But the April 2021 decision was rather swift and sought to change things in a very short term. The import of 600 items was banned immediately, including things like chemical fertilizers and different kind of food items like oats, soy milk and dairy.
In July, then President Rajapaksa told a UN Food Summit that this was a response to chronic health problems and ecological destruction due to agricultural inputs based on synthetic chemicals. But the swiftness with which this ban was pushed through suggested that it was as much a response to the issue of depleting foreign exchange reserves as it was an agricultural reform.
Ever since, though, the story of Sri Lanka's economic crisis is increasingly being told as the story of its switch to organic agriculture. Sri Lanka is being increasingly held up as an example of all that is wrong with organic agriculture and all its inadequacies.
I'm sorry to say that this crisis is not solely due to the fertilizer ban or agrochemical ban. It has been happening over the years, so it is not only due to this.
This is CM Wijayaratna, a Sri Lankan, a senior agronomist who has worked in the areas of agricultural techniques, technologies, and agricultural policy all over the world, as well as Sri Lanka. We spoke to him on June 10th, 2022.
Of course, we all know that Ukraine issue has contributed a lot. It's not only to Sri Lanka. Over the globe, the price of gasoline has gone up, including in the US. So the real problem is this. Now, right now, the petrol diesel price in Washington and in Colombo are more or less the same. I think it's the same. I think I'm correct. So the difference is an average person in USA can purchase thousands of liters of gasoline with her or his month's salary. But an average Sri Lankan, not even 100. So this is the difference. So the real bargaining power or spending power is very low for an average Sri Lankan, especially for the poor. So this is. So I don't know whether I answered your question. So the direct answer is it is to my knowledge, not to my knowledge. Factually, it is not only due to fertilizer ban.
And curious to know how big a part did the switch to organic farming play? What happened as a result of it that precipitated the crisis?
Let me go back to 2017. At that time, there was a genuine effort towards ecological farming. The problem, it was genuine effort, and effort initiated by the president himself. But I think it is all right to say that one issue was it was by the presidential secretariat, and the government and the presidential secretariat were not exactly the same. I think you are confused if I say the executive presidency is there, but still I am saying at that time the president and the government were not exactly the same. Prime Minister, the cabinet ministers, and the government agencies. I mean, they were doing very important things, but I don't think that they were that serious about ecological farming. I think that was a mistake. Had we started at that point, we could have avoided a lot. I feel, and many people feel, that the chemical ban was not only to go for ecological farm. It is partly or mainly to save money, to reduce the deficit, foreign exchange, dollar deficit.
So, many people understand and appreciate all that is good with organic agriculture, the kind of benefit it does to the ecosystem, to the soil, to the health of the people. But many are not convinced that it can produce all the food that we need to feed the people. Do you agree with that?
Certainly not. If you go for legumes, nitrogen fixation, and the natural, non-destructive ways of providing phosphate-like chemicals if there's a need, and microelements, it's not very destructive ecologically because trace elements. So even if you want to apply chemicals to some extent, I would say it is all right. But go for a nitrogen fixation, SRI, and SCI.
With the terms SRI and SCI, Vijay is referring to the system of rice intensification and system of crop intensification, respectively. These are both cultivation methods designed to maximize crop productivity. So that's more crop per drop and more crop per hectare, using a basket of techniques related to land preparation, crop choices, planting, soil moisture management, and soil fertility management.
Because in Sri Lanka, even today, many agriculturalists don't believe this because they are like myself, trained during Green Revolution period.
By green revolution, Vijay is referring to farming systems based on high-yielding varieties of seeds, intense use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and intensive water use. Essentially, green revolution farming is the antithesis to agroecology and organic farming.
So, therefore, we have to go for a revolution in the education system. Even today, agroecological education is not significant in high school or even the place where I graduated. I'm sorry to say, I'm an agriculture graduate. Even there, ecological agriculture, they have introduced. Even the agriculture department is now focusing. Agriculture department has a separate place in their field stations for conservation farming and ecological agriculture. So I don't put the blame to agriculture department. They are doing a good job, but we should further strengthen this. So the answer is, at least in different parts of the world, it is not going to be a problem. We can fully adopt ecological agriculture and feed the globe adequately and excessively. It's not a problem. And I say again, natural ways of farming coupled with these agroecological practices like SRI and SCI, and combined with mulching, contour farming, and enhancing the microbial activities through other means. So if we put together all these things and at very little or no cost, even with small farmers, this can be done. And it has been proved in many areas through SRI, SCI, coupled with mulching and other organic methods. It can be done. I'm very much certain, and many other agriculturists know and know very well that how to do this. Farmers also know, many farmers now know.
Vijay, you have already begun to answer this question. You have outlined this at several points in our conversation so far. Given where we are at the moment in Sri Lanka, what should be the path ahead from an agronomical point of view? What are the next steps that different actors, such as policymakers, bureaucrats, farmers, what are the different steps they should take in light of what you said? What does a pathway out of this crisis look like to you?
So, this is based on literature, what I learned from literature, and my experience as a farmer. And I have worked in about 20 countries, and most of them are, the environment is similar to Sri Lanka, including India. I spent on the average about 5 months in India in the past 2 decades, and also in other South Asian countries as well. So if I have given the power, authority, I will, first thing, I will not be authoritative. I will adopt a 100% participatory approach. This is very important in a country like Sri Lanka. Because in Sri Lanka, what happened recently is there were, please excuse me for using this term, there were pundits. I know everything. There were some people, even advisors to the president, who are not even agriculturists sometimes, don't know basic farming, advised on fertilizer, complete ban on fertilizer, this and that. So I would allow fertilizer imports maybe 10 years or at least 5 years or minimum 3 years. If it's 10 years, better, but 10% reduction every year. 10th year, it is 0. If we don't have money, then maybe 5 years, 20% reduction. So 5th year, 0, something like that, or trace very little. Why? Because, as I said, farmers are not ready. More than the farmers, the soils are not ready. So we have to regenerate the soils, regenerate the ecosystem. It takes time. And so that's number one. Now, how to do this? All of us know what happened in the World War II. Even renowned, very profitable factories were converted to the requirement of the war, even producing armaments. Okay, so we should declare a war kind of situation for agroecological development. Okay, we import fertilizer, but legume campaign.
Legume campaign is Vijay's suggestion to promote planting of legumes alongside main crops and during the fallow season. Planting of legumes is a biological method of maintaining nitrogen levels in the soil.
And then government has already started, people started even homestead development, ecologically, even in urban areas. So this kind of measures. And two the other important things, the institutional setup, and then kind of watershed-based agriculture. So Sri Lanka has little over 100 watersheds, but the agriculture advice and everything is based on administrative units and not watersheds. So I would say we should be watershed based. So let me finish that part and then come to institutional aspect. If I forget, please remind me about institutional. It's very important. So I would organize farmers. That is the institutional part. We need a strong network of non-political farm organizations. Okay, we have farm organizations. All of them are not political, but it's not a good network, strong network. So this network should develop watershed-based plans for each watershed, starting with micro watershed plans, because of different reasons. One is watershed is a physical unit where the micro wardships are integrated. What to do in the upper part of the watershed, affects what you can do for the potential in the lower part. That's one reason, and I can elaborate on this. I think there's no need. Other thing is, in Sri Lanka, where a lot of small farmers are scattered all over, the pollution is point source pollution, not non-point. It's point source. Unless they are organized and then there's a micro watershed based planning is done, it's very difficult. So therefore, watershed based is important. Watershed based planning is important. And then everything we discussed earlier, the nitrogen fixation, legume campaign, SRI, SCI, SRI, SCI. So these things with other practices like contour farming. Watershed planning means the entire micro watershed can be planted on contours. Contour planning is probably number one in watershed-based planning. Okay? So that is that. Other part is institutional part. So we need a good network of farmer organizations. So what is the other alternative? In the last few days back, I posed this question. So some people, even specialists, promote that we should open this and we should invite foreign investors or local investors to go for hugely mechanized, large-scale farm units. Then so they completely ignore the 2 million small farmers. So what will happen to them? They will become slaves, landless slaves with a meager wage rate. And I'm very openly saying, I will not go for that kind of thing. Okay? It is not communism, it is not socialism. It is just fairness. So we organize farmer network, and farm network undertake this planning, ecological planning based on watersheds, and synchronizing activities, matching monsoon crop with monsoon rain, and then dry season other crops, especially legumes, all these kinds of things into supply organized by farmers. The small farmers are the retailers, the apex organization or high level organizations are the wholesalers, and this is happening in some places of the world. So this can be done, and we have done this. This is first-hand experience. So the farm organizations, there can be farmer companies, even for importing fertilizer or other things. So the farmer organization network, farmer companies, or even farmer cooperatives, whatever the name is immaterial. I don't use the term cooperatives because in general cooperatives in our part of the world, they say corrupt. So corruption is associated with cooperatives. So therefore, we don't use. But whatever the name you use, it is cooperation. It is solidarity. It is collective action. Okay, so this is the institutional organization we need. My last point is, how can we do this? Easy to say this. How can we do this? Again, we have done this large scale. In Chaska, it is our pilot area was 100,000 hectares. Chaska is the only state, in the first state in India where state level water use association federation was established, and also the water user associations were unique, because Chaska, I think for the first time, gave voting rights to women and scheduled tribes and castes. Probably you know this, STNSC. So this takes this side issue. So this can be done. So the strong network of farm organizations is important. How can you do this? With social mobilization initially. Actually, they don't need anybody. Okay. And one thing before I forget, if a pharma company or the apex or high-level farm organizations cannot manage this kind of business, because they should emerge as self-sustained business entities, I may say that we like to see a new private sector emerging from within the small farmer or rural sector, which can compete with the private sector. We are not against private sector. This is another private sector to really empower the small farmer, the small producer, including fishermen. Okay, so how can we do this? Mobilizers, and only at the initial stage. How can we do this in Sri Lanka? Some people may not like, many people will like this. We have at least 6 government officials or government staff at a lower level, different names. Some 1 or 2 for agriculture, 1 or 2 for administration, 1 or 2 for distribution of subsidies and various things. Okay, most of these are college graduates, and some. I think some people may say that they are political appointees, but political appointees of both the major parties. Government staffs, at least 50% or 30% of them, thousands of them are there. They can be, their capacity can be enhanced by a small group of people who have this expertise, who can act as mentors. This small group of mentors can enhance the capacity of these government servants, maybe selected lot of government servants who can be used as mobilizers. We can do this in no time, enhancing the capacity of mobilizers. So they can organize farmers. So we can reach where the Andhra Pradesh is now in no time.
Andhra Pradesh is a state in southern India, which has been able to bring a large part of its cultivated area under organic agriculture.
I'm saying this with experience, first-hand experience, and not from theory, right? And some people know this. So this is the institutional setup. At the top, maybe I'm the president or prime minister. We feel, and this is not my idea, about 2 or 3 of us brainstormed and we developed this apex body and all these things. It's not only my idea. One person's name is Wijayaratna, another person is Dr. Lionel Virapon. His agroecology knowledge is much superior than mine. Okay, we feel that there must be an apex body representing multiple disciplines. Okay, a specialist in agroecology, a specialist with experience in mentoring these institutions, farmer mobilization kind of thing, and specialists in trade and media and information technology, input services. So there can be a director for input services. Under that director, there can be staff at different levels. I mean, existing people can be appointed, not new people. Maybe agriculture department and agrarian services can provide this top people to those positions, and some other departments, maybe Mahavali and others for other positions. So apex body, a multidisciplinary body for that. So the president or prime minister must listen to that multidisciplinary body, not other advisors, or he or she should not take decisions without the knowledge of that multidisciplinary team. So this is the institutional structure, which is very, very important with the other side. So these two sides should go apart with each other.
Thank you so much, Vijay, for sharing your valuable thoughts and perspectives on this very important topic. We hope that your suggestions reach those in positions of power in Sri Lanka and are actively considered for implementation.
Sri Lankans continue to go through tough times. We hope that they emerge out of it soon and come out stronger. Thanks for your time, Vijay.
And lastly, I want to thank our beloved audience for tuning in and listening.